Welcome back. Continuing from the last lesson, we shall extend the pricing and valuation concepts that we learnt to equity swaps. Let's jump right in. Equity swaps can come in several different forms, but minimally one of the sides must pay equity returns. For the curriculum, we will examine three types of equity swaps: receive equity return, pay fixed; receive equity return, pay floating; and receive equity return, pay another equity return. Let's start with the first type. We shall use the same interest rate swap example from the last lesson, just that instead of the floating rate leg, we replace it with the equity return leg. Like interest rate swaps, there is no exchange of notional principal initiation and expiration. The fixed rate payer periodically pays based on the swap fixed rate that is determined at initiation. Determining the fixed leg of the swap is as what we've covered in the last lesson. The periodic coupon can be calculated using this formula based on the appropriate discount factors. So if these are the LIBOR rates and their respective discount factors, the unannualized coupon rate works out to 1.6%. Based on a notional principal of $10 million, we've determined that the regular fixed rate payment is $160,000. The swap fixed rate is an annualized rate of 6.4%. The cash flows for the equity leg can be expressed as such, where RE is the unannualized return of the specified equity or index for the period, with or without dividends as specified in the contract. At each settlement date, the two cash flows are net off, so the party with a greater liability has to pay the difference. You may wonder, why would the two parties enter into such an agreement? The equity return payer may actually hold the underlying stocks, but feels that the stock price will drop, so he hedges his position by entering the swap without having to sell off his stocks. He agrees to pass off the returns to the counterparty in return for fixed interest returns. The equity return receiver may want exposure to the underlying stocks without having to own the stocks. The advantage of this approach over buying the underlying shares is that there is little capital requirement and also circumvents purchase restrictions on the stocks. So, for example, the underlying equity index was 100 points at initiation of the swap and increased to 104 on the first settlement date 90 days later. As the underlying equity return was 4% for the quarter, the equity return receiver should receive $400,000. The fixed rate receiver should receive the regular $160,000. As such, the equity return receiver should receive $240,000 from the fixed rate receiver on the first settlement. When it comes to valuation, you should be familiar with the process by now. Again, we will make arguments from the perspective of the fixed rate receiver, who is long the fixed coupon bond and short the equity index. The value of the swap is therefore the value of the equivalent fixed coupon bond minus the value of the equity position. The value of the fixed side is the present value of coupons plus the present value of principal, which we've learned can be simplified into this form per $1 notional if we have the discount factors. At this point in time, there are only two settlements left, so we can ignore the earlier cash flows. We have earlier calculated the unannualized fixed coupon rate is 1.6%. So if the discount factors for the current 90-day and 180-day LIBOR is as such, we have a value of 0.9974 per $1 notional for the fixed rate bond. Since our notional principal is $10 million, the value of the fixed coupon bond is $9.974 million. The value of the equity position is easy. As the returns for each period are paid out at each settlement date, the value of the equity position resets to the principal amount at each settlement date. So, 90 days after initiation, the value of the equity position is simply the notional principal of $10 million. The value of the swap to the fixed rate receiver at this point is therefore minus $26,000. However, when making valuation in between settlement dates, the value of the equity position is the equity index at time t divided by the equity index at the last settlement times the notional principal. You may want to take this as a practice. Let's say another 30 days after the last settlement, the equity index fell to 101, and these are the relevant LIBOR rates at this instance. What is the value of the swap to the fixed rate receiver? For the equity position, the index has dropped to 101 from 104. The value of the equity position is therefore $9.712 million. For the fixed coupon bond, there are 60 days to the next coupon of 1.6% and 150 days to maturity. The value of the fixed coupon bond is therefore $10.091 million. So at this point, the value of the swap to the fixed rate receiver is $379,000. And we're done with the pricing evaluation of equity swaps where one party receives equity return and the opposite party receives fixed interest. We'll not go through the second type where the opposite party receives floating rate interest, as it is straightforward and we've learnt the pricing and valuation of the floating rate leg in the last lesson. Essentially, you should remember that the value of the floater resets to par at initiation and on settlement dates. Since the value of the equity position also resets to the principal amount on these dates, the value of the swap on these dates is essentially zero. And the third type is also very straightforward. It is essentially exchanging the return of one equity for the return of another equity. The value and exchange of payments will be the periodic return of the respective equity indices on each settlement date. We shall illustrate with an example. 3 months ago, Aria entered into a $1 million one-year quarterly equity swap, where she is the receiver of the returns of the S&P 500 and payer of the Hang Seng Index return for each period. Given the following equity index data, what is the net amount that Aria should pay or receive at the first settlement? Pause the video now and work out your answer. And we're back. Let's first calculate the S&P return, which is the amount that she should receive. This is the unannualized gain in the S&P index times the notional principal of $1 million. Next, we likewise calculate the amount she should pay based on the gain in HSI. This value is negative, which means she should receive this amount instead of paying it. And the net amount to receive is the S&P return minus the HSI return. In total, she should receive $89,358. 1 month after the first settlement, the following equity index data was observed. What is the value of the swap contract to Aria based on the latest data? Pause the video now and work out your answer. And we're back. Now, if you remember, the value of an equity position is on the current index as a percentage of the last settlement index times the notional principal. It's very important that you base it on the index at the last settlement date, as the value is reset to the principal amount after payment was made. So, with that, we can calculate the value of the S&P position. Likewise, we calculate the value of the HSI position. As Aria is the S&P return receiver, she is long S&P and short HSI. The value of the swap to her is therefore the value of S&P position minus the value of HSI position. This works out to minus $2,381. And that concludes our discussion on equity swaps. You should have found this quite straightforward. Next, we shall move on to currency swaps. See you again.